Welcome to Shift Happens, the podcast where we talk about energy, tech, leadership, and large scale projects, where sometimes, let's be honest, not everything goes according to plan. My name is Manuel.
And my name is Dirk. And together we both talk about topics that we regard as interesting, challenging in the wide world of energy developments.
Okay, Dirk. So in the recent podcasts, we talked about the global situation, very generic topic, but I think it was very important to understand for everybody what's going on in the world. But with the upcoming videos, we want to dive a little bit deeper in some details. And in particularly, given the current situation, we would like to talk about the energy situation in Europe and today, particularly in Germany. Particularly in Germany, there is a lot going on. There is an energy crisis, you could literally call it that way. But Germany is really trying to balance the becoming green situation. So they want to reduce CO2 emissions, but also they need to make sure that they are becoming more energy independent. So the current situation in Germany is really, really difficult. Germany has phased out coal energy, it has phased out nuclear energy, it's reducing oil and gas energy. So they want to be really become green. But I think everybody understands currently that the energy demand cannot be covered by renewables alone yet. So there are multiple ways in how Europe and how Germany could and should maybe tackle this situation. And we want to dive into several aspects of this in the upcoming podcasts. Today, we're going to focus on gas, which is one of the most sustainable, backup energy sources currently for renewable energy. So, gas storages and stuff like that is really important still in the German economy. But also there are a lot of gas potentials still in Germany that could be produced locally. And we want to dive a little bit deeper into that in today's podcast.
Yes, it's a very interesting topic because we both come from the industry that cared a lot about these things. Um, and yeah, let's talk about where we are today, but also where we were coming from in the past and how these technologies and options could develop and what the challenges actually are.
Okay, Dirk, I still think we should start with the very basics. So, how much gas is Germany actually currently producing?
It produces very little. It's like 5% of the domestic demand is produced in the country, and these numbers are declining since decades already. Yeah, that means we import 95% of our gas. Um, our demand is 860 terawatt hours per year, which is a gigantic number. It's billions and billions of cubic meters of gas. Still needed in the industry and for power generation in the country. And the sources of this gas nowadays is Norway, Netherlands. These are the bigger importers to us. Then we have some transit gas through Belgium and increasingly LNG gas through new terminals in the north of the country. And a lot of that LNG gas comes from the United States.
Yeah, but this is a very recent development. I think in the past, Germany was very heavy reliant on Russia, but this has changed during the crisis. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, well, we all know the dates from 2022 where things happened, and very short after that, our main supply at the time from Russia through the pipelines, Nord Stream through the Baltic, which were anyway heavily debated before, suddenly ceased. The pipelines were basically damaged, so they could not function anymore. And that was the situation. We talked today a lot about why we were dependent on that. I think we're now much more diversified in our supply, but still, it's fundamentally not only that we are dependent on one specific country, or whether it's actually we are 95% dependent on imports.
Yeah, and this is very interesting for such a huge economy than Germany. And it's also a little bit situation what's going on because also industries and other businesses are seeing this pressure that is coming. There's a heavy dependence on other countries, and the thing is, like historically, I think the situation in Germany was different. There was quite a lot of gas production in Germany itself, making it more self-sufficient.
Yeah. So, okay, if we roll things back from, let's say, the end of World War II, at that time, oil was still the big motor everywhere. And also Europe and Germany were importing a lot of oil also from the developing fields in the Middle East. Um, with the changes in industry and further developments, gas became more important. We were phasing out coal practically since the 80s. And gas is more easily accessible, more cleaner energy. Yeah, so that became important. We imported a lot from Russia until 2022, but also the domestic gas production was expanded. Yeah, with some bigger fields in the north of Germany. So that's how things basically also domestically started rolling for gas until the topic of CO2 emissions and the whole energy transition became the key element now of our energy politics. So also gas production that was quite significant in the past is now diminishing. But also it goes in parallel in line with the depletion of these big fields. They're not producing that much anymore. Also looking for new stuff would be much more cost intensive. And we will come to that anyway later in the talk. And so we have that, and then we also have the general, as I said, energy transition, the resentment against hydrocarbon fuels, and so that is another element of the picture that we're facing. Things were basically running down. Yeah, it's strategically driven as well that we're not so much focusing on gas anymore, on renewable energies to manage the emissions that we have.
Yeah, and this had implications to the industry itself. So you said already we had quite some industry, gas industry in Germany, but with this phasing out of these energy sources, also the domestic oil and gas producers have of course disappeared. So there's literally no oil and gas producer in Germany right now really active in a sense. And also the gas transport companies, there are namely two major players, which are Sif and Uniper. They used to be part of Russian companies. They have been decoupled in 2022 for given reasons and are now currently state owned and are subject to privatization. So there's a lot of transition and a lot of change, and also a disappearing industry can be seen in Germany. And this has severe implications.
It's the disappearing industry on one hand, but some stuff will still stay. But I think the main focus also that the shareholders of these industries are not in Germany anymore. The companies that we're talking about, or the few remaining oil and gas companies, they are actually run by foreign shareholders at the moment. Yeah. So to take any initiative more that is in the interest of the state is also still a challenging element. And you already said that also even the distribution companies, although owned by the state, but this is only a transitional stage. They need to be privatized. So we will see who will buy these things then. Yeah? That will be also a bit of a key element on how the energy management of Germany is going forward.
Okay, so now in theory, or the big question is, could Germany produce more domestic gas again? I think we tapped already briefly into it that the regular gas production, the easy gas production, has been declining for years now in Germany. So this kind of potential is almost exploited. But there are different formations or reserves that you could still tap into as Germany. And namely, we're talking about shale gas or tight gas formations, but they require a different way of exploiting them. And this is a technology that has been very heavily debated in Germany for years, and it's actually currently banned in years. And this is, of course, hydraulic fracturing. One thing is really important to understand. There are other countries like America, they have been tapping into this technology very extensively, and they have managed to become self-sustainable in gas and even exporting gas into other countries. So there are countries that are tapping into the technology and are utilizing the technology to a big extent and help to self-sustain the country.
Yeah, that is that. For America, the situation in Germany in general, in Europe, is a little bit different. Um, we have, as you said, we have deep, tight gas that is stored still, gas stored in sort of what we would call reservoir rocks. Yeah? And then we have shale gas which is um, that was generated in the original rocks where it was coming from, high organic rich rocks, but it did not escape. Yeah? It did not move into a reservoir. It stayed back basically. Yeah, and there's also a difference in the potentials for these. These deep tight gas reservoirs, it's not that great as potential, and it's much deeper than in the US, these layers, thousands of meters. So it is cost intensive. And then we have the shale gas, which is the much bigger potential in Germany specifically. And that is in the debate actually in the moment much more. So these shale gas layers, as we said, they are like the original, the mother rocks, so the source rocks of gas. They're distributed in the south of Lower Saxony, Niedersachsen, and the north of Nordrhein-Westfalen. Um, and basically, it's the extension of the rocks that we were basically mining for coal in the area, but they go much deeper into North Germany, and these would be the targets in order to extract this shale gas. So these formations are called carboniferous, for example. Yeah, there's several more options in other geological formations in Germany, but they are a little bit less important than this. So this deep shale gas formations, they are sort of exploited in the beginning in the same way like you normally look for oil and gas. You have a work program that you're following, you make some general geophysical measurements, seismic, you look where the stuff is distributed, how deep it is, how thick it is, and so on. And then you start at one point drilling wells to probe it, get more data. And then when you start developing, you drill into that, but you not just punch a vertical hole in it. You basically try to follow these layers in order later to have the maximum exposure to produce from these layers. And there, then this fracking comes into place because these formations are very dense, very tight. Even gas is not flowing that great in these layers. So you need to enhance the surface contact area with these rocks. And that is done by fracking. Fracking essentially is putting small charges, little explosions all along these horizontal boreholes then. And by that creating a lot of fractures, cracks, pathways. And in these opened up pathways, then there's a mixture of sand with some chemical additives pumped in. So these cracks stay open because they naturally would like to close under all the pressure down there. And this is how you open up the pathways basically for the gas. And that's how you would then start producing. On top of that, all these boreholes are cased. So basically you put like metal tubing all the way down there, and there's several sets of these metal tubings up to the surface, which also then prevents that whatever you basically pump through these borehole is basically going into shallower groundwater layers and all of these things. But this is actually standard procedure in all of the operations that we have for any kind of hydrocarbon extraction.
Yeah, that's a very technological explanation of the system, but I think it's a proven concept, and it's not too far away from conventional oil and gas production. The only element that is different is the fracking itself, because the reservoir rock in itself is so tight that gas cannot flow by itself. But the question is now, okay, but given all that, what is the real potential of these reserves in Germany? Is it significant so we could or should look into that again? Or is it more okay, yeah, it's a little bit like 2 or 3% of the domestic need. So what volumes are we talking about?
It's like everything when you start looking for oil and gas or any kind of these resources, you make some assessments based on measurements that you have. And on paper, these numbers look quite impressive. Yeah. So the common assessments are around 20 billion cubic meters of gas to be produced per year from shale gas. That translates to, we had the number of 860 terawatt of gas. That's actually the burning value, the caloric value of the gas um, that we have every year in Germany. The shale gas could cover 200 of these terawatts. So like 20% of what our domestic need is at this point in time could be covered by the shale gas.
And that's a lot, actually. So that's a substantial potential to become self-sufficient. But what is hindering Germany now to really seriously look into that?
Well, it's on several levels. We already mentioned that these layers in Germany, they are deep, much deeper than the layers that you commonly know, but you can see in the US. In the US, it's few hundred meters, 1,000 meters deep maybe, in the area where they have this heavy shale production. In Germany, I think it starts with the deepest coal seams that we had there at 700 meters below surface, and from 700 meters down to thousands of meters depth, you would need to drill. So it's more cost intensive in order to start developing these layers. That's one thing. The fracking technology is not the problem because that has been done before the ban for 30 years in Germany as well, thousands of times. It's standard technology actually. The challenge actually comes from the mode on how you produce shale gas. In a normal gas well, you drill down, and then with one or two or three wells, you basically get 80 or maybe sometimes 90% of the gas out of the reservoir in a porous rock. If you drill into a shale rock with a horizontal well, you frack it several times, you open up these pathways, and then the flow starts. There's a limit to it. So maybe these wells, they are effective for 1 or 2 years, and then the production is not economic anymore because there are limitations. You might open a lot of cracks, but the matrix, the rock itself, can only deliver a certain amount. Yeah. So that means you have drilled one well, you produce for 1 or 2 years, and then you need to drill a new well, maybe 500 meters, 1,000 meters away, and start over again. And if you look at that from high above, you consume a lot of landscape by that. Yeah. So basically, you successively need to go step by step by step to produce a large area. And there we have then a challenge with population density in Germany. We have all kinds of other land use, agricultural, cities, villages, industry areas. So it's a challenge actually plan it out in an extent area in a country like Germany. Yeah, we're not Wyoming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I said. I mean, this is what's actually happening in the United States. It's really literally like grids of wells that are drilled in one after each other, so to say. And America can do that because of the landscape. It's not so densely populated, particularly in the areas where these shale gas reservoirs are in the States. And it's also, as you just mentioned, the gas reservoir in Germany is deeper. The shale gas reservoirs are way deeper. This makes the wells on the economic side way more expensive. The technology way more complex in a sense. So it's a kind of a trade-off of technology costs versus revenue to really produce this shale gas in Germany. But there is a lot of potential, and it's definitely something that Germany should look into again. Okay, so now we talked about the technology, and I think we have shown that this is a proven technology. It's not something new, and it works. And also, we have talked a little bit about the potential in Germany, which is actually really significant. So it could support Germany in being a little bit more energy independent. Um, we tapped a little bit about the challenges that Germany is facing, but maybe it's good to recap or to structure them and really summarize what is really hindering Germany to get started.
Yeah, to summarize, it all comes down to the challenges we're facing. It starts with the geological complexity. These layers are deep. You need to put some money on the table to get there. Then you have the fracking operations themselves, because you induce some disequilibrium in the formations down there. You have the potential to cause little earthquakes, which are not desired for people who live in the area. Then you use a lot of water. Water management and also the disposal of contaminated water is something to be looked at. Um, you have this whole regulatory environment, strict environmental laws. They have quite an impact on the planning phases of these projects. There might be the concern that there's methane leakage, yeah, which once in a while can happen, needs to be managed, that it does not happen that much anymore. That all in all is the technical complexity around these things.
So yeah, there's a lot of technical and also public opinion is going on, and there are concerns which are to a degree valid. But I think to bring it back now into the big context, which was Germany needs to look into a way to maybe be a little bit more energy self-sufficient while not increasing its CO2 emissions substantially. I still think that gas is a reasonable option, and we just have shown that there's quite some potential that actually could help Germany to compensate for, to be less dependent on international imports. Now, given the situation with the energy crisis, you really, I think this is a time where you should look into these options again and say objectively if this is something reasonable to be done, and tap into the discussion, talk with the industry, talk with the people again, because in the end, you want to be self-sufficient with energy. There is a green agenda which is important, and I think
With that, I
gas
thank
could
you for
actually
dialing in
fit
today's
this
episode.
balance between more energy, more self-sufficient, and going towards the green transition as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So thank you very much, Dirk, for today's session. Let's go that way.
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Maybe it gave you something to think about. Maybe you agree, you disagree. Let us know.
If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to share it with your friends or colleagues or tag us on social media.
You can find us on MND Consult. That is mnd-consult.com.
And if you have a topic you would like us to unpack or a story you would like to share, feel free to reach out.
So take care and remember,
Shift happens.